Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Richard Moglen. Welcome back to another stock market outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. And this week we had a few bullish signs from the Nasdaq and the growth space in general. We saw a lot more stocks breaking out to new all-time highs and sticking. We saw, most importantly, a follow-through day on this Thursday on the Nasdaq and a retake of that key 21 EMA. And then on this Friday, we had kind of increased bullish action where we followed through here and retook that key 50 SMA. Now, it doesn't mean we're out of the woods here, but it is a very promising start. And just in general, there's a lot more kind of growth stocks forming the right side of their bases. And it seems like things are shaping up in the right direction. Now, I would like to see us retake kind of this pivot right here, right at this level. And I want to see this 50 SMA kind of shift from being resistance as it was back here to now being support. So even if we do pull back next week, I want to see us stick above that key moving average. Now, this doesn't mean we're kind of predicting what's going to happen. Instead, we're kind of taking it day by day and reframing our view on the market every time we get new information. And going over to the S&P 500, let's take a look at that index, which has been a little bit stronger than the Nasdaq and tech in general. You can see we actually breached the 4,000 mark for the first time ever. That's huge. And overall, this looks like a nice uptrend, pullbacks to the 50 SMA here, and nice support bars off that key moving average. So overall, in terms of the general indexes, things look good. The Nasdaq still has a little bit more to do to prove itself, but we'll see what happens next week. Now, in this video, as always, we'll go through the market indexes in depth and day by day. We'll talk about some potential new leadership. We'll talk about how the old leaders are performing. We'll also cover how my previous watchlist performed, sentiment from a few different sources, the IBD Big Picture article. And if you do enjoy my analysis, please go ahead and leave a like down below. It really does help me out and my channel. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one every single week. So diving in, let's start with the potential new leadership. This list is very small at this moment because stuff really hasn't proved itself just yet. But in my view, this is the kind of list of stocks that has been holding up the strongest and could potentially lead during the next uptrend. So first up, we've got UPST, which if we go to a daily here, you can see has been very strong since this earnings gap up where it moved up over 80%. And so far, it's holding the 10 SMA, this line here, and is finding nice support at the anchored VWAP. If we go to a 65-minute chart from this earnings gap up day, you can see right here, consolidates near there, has basically a perfect touch back here, bounces off it, and so far is setting up a potential high tight flag here. You could draw a descending trend line and potentially watch this level. So overall, great action here, declining volume on this pullback, and we'll see what happens next week. Zim similarly is also setting up a potential kind of high tight flag here with a nice inside week with a strong closing range, and overall had very strong action and a little bit of a 3-bar break on this Friday. If we go back here, you can see very strong action closing right near the top of the trading range and also an inside day and up, which is why there's a blue histogram bar right here. But overall, looks great. And similarly, you could draw a descending trend line, which is just below at this moment. And I love how it held the 21 EMA, which is really what wing stocks do during their strong uptrends. AMAT as well has been very strong. You can see that it broke out this past week. Right here on this bar on above average volume, pulled back and consolidated for 2 straight days, and then had strong gap ups on Thursday and Friday. And if you want kind of more analysis about this company and their fundamentals and story, I just made a video analyzing this stock. So go ahead and check that out. It'll be linked below in the description and should be popping up right now. But overall, AMAT looks strong, and really the semiconductor space in general looks incredibly powerful. Just looking at SMH, you can see that it retook the 50 SMA and had nice follow through on Friday with a lot of stocks in this group breaking out and doing well. And if you go over here, you can actually see in TC2000, the holdings, you can see the weekly change. Let's sort by that. AMAT was leading. LRCX, also a nice breakout. Let me move this over here. You can see KLAC, Teradyne retaking the 50 and holding. NVIDIA as well, powering through. That's good to see. And overall, this is definitely a very shaky base here. But if this kind of big cap is doing well, that bodes well for the entire group. Onto also looks strong. TSM just barely retaking the 50 SMA, but I think they announced some positive news. CDNS strong. So basically the entire group is acting well. QRVO, I love the look of this chart. Look at this. Nice breakout on Friday on above average volume, exactly what you want to see. So in general, definitely a group I'm watching closely, and I'm looking for potential leaders within this group. And even AMD here, you can see pullback all the way to 200-day moving average and the bottom of this prior base, and now it's moving up and retaking that key moving average. So definitely a group I'll be watching very closely. RH as well has followed through on this breakout here. If we go to a weekly chart, a nice follow through week on above average volume. And it's good to have a bit of exposure to not just tech stocks. And lastly, we've got SAM, which also had a decent week. You can see not quite as strong as RH, but overall did follow through here. And we'll see if this sticks. I don't like the look of this bar right here, but it is on below average volume. It's important to keep in mind that you should be watching both price and volume in tandem. This bar is actually less worrisome than this one to me, just because this one was a bit of a strong fade here on above average volume. So we'll see what happens with this stock. But overall, nice growth numbers in MarketSmith, and it's been on the focus list a bunch of times during the past few weeks. So that's kind of my view on potential new leadership. Obviously, this list is still developing, and as stuff falls through and breaks out, I'll be adding names and potentially taking some off of this list. And if you have any suggestions, let me know down below in the comments. And also let me know if there's any kind of major themes that you're seeing, like semiconductor stocks, because it's always important to kind of identify the leading groups that could really contribute to the leadership during the next uptrend. So let me know down below. And I also want to take a look at the old leaders, because some of these are shaping up, retaking key moving averages. So some of these could potentially lead during the next uptrend, but you don't want to be married to these stocks and these ideas. But I think it's important to keep an eye on these stocks as well. And going through the charts, we'll start with apps. And overall, this did have a nice 3-bar break on this Wednesday, although it was on below average volume, and some follow through on this Friday, although we had a pretty poor close. And overall, this looks like it's still building out its base, and we'll see what happens with this former leader. But overall, definitely a promising move this past week. And next up, we've got CLH. You can see we had a high volume gap down here, but it was supported off the lows because of that positive closing range. And you can see that the RS line overall is in a downtrend from this point. But we did have a retake of that key high volume close area on this Wednesday, and then some follow through on this Friday, retaking the 21 EMA. So we'll see what happens. This still looks to be base building to me. Corsair also continues to base here and kind of form out a potential rounded bottom. We do have nice supportive action on this day and this day, but we'll see what happens. This definitely needs a little bit of time as it forms out the potential right side of this base here and approaches the 50 SMA. This is a very key level. CrowdStrike also right at the 21 EMA. It was rejected on Friday. We'll see what happens. Definitely needs a little bit more time. ENPH also building out that right side. Etsy also building out that right side. You can see it was rejected near the 50 SMA on this past Thursday. XP also needs a little bit of time. I'll be saying that for a lot of these. Futu potential double bottom here, although it is a little bit flawed. But this is a potential pivot, and I like how it retook the 50 SMA and had a decent day on this Friday. And overall in the week, it was up quite strongly and looks pretty strong, and found support at the 21 EMA on the weekly. Moving on, we've got Fiverr, which also is at its 21 EMA and was able to hold that on this Friday, but it's still building out a potential base here. GRWG looks a little bit stronger back at the 50 SMA, and it looks like it just closed above it on this Friday. And overall, I don't like the volume on these down days, but it is above those two key moving averages, which is a positive. Net above the 21 EMA, but still has some work to do. NEO fell all the way down to the 200-day moving average. It's hard to imagine when you own it right here that it's going to fall all the way to this key moving average. But obviously, you have to keep in mind that that's always a possibility. And so far, this needs a lot of work before it can really do something meaningful and potentially start a new uptrend. This is the top of the base, and you can see it pull back about 50%. And on this Friday, or actually this Thursday, it was rejected at the 21 EMA. Pins looks a little bit stronger than most of these former growth leaders. You can see it's well above the 50 SMA. Great action on this Wednesday and Thursday with strong closes. Looks pretty good. PLTR still needs some work to do, building out the right side here. Peloton, like Neo, moved all the way down to the 200-day moving average, about 40% here, and had a pretty poor close on this Thursday. Roku still building out that left side here, potentially bottoming here. SC, nice powerful move off the bottom, but we'll see what happens. A move straight to all-time highs would be kind of improper, so I would expect some kind of back and fill, and then potentially a resumption of this right-hand side. Shop as well pulled all the way back to the 200-day moving average, but nice moves on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. SQ back at the 50-day, but it was rejected on this past Thursday. Teladoc decidedly below the 200-day moving average. If you're playing the kind of long-term game, you really want this level down here to hold at about 168. So far it is doing that, but we'll see what happens. I don't like all these high volume down days versus the up days are on below average volume. Tesla, you can see, is potentially forming out a right-hand side here. I do like how it's kind of a higher low here, and we'll see what happens on Monday and this coming week. Although it did have a pretty poor close, I think there was some positive news that came out this weekend. TSM, really strong move, and overall, as we've talked about, the chips are very, very strong, and overall, I would expect this to kind of form out the right-hand side and challenge all-time highs. Twilio, you can see, moved off the 200-day moving average. Nice 3 days here, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and retook that 21 EMA, but it definitely looks like it needs a little bit more time if this base is going to be a little bit symmetrical, but overall promising action to end the week. Twitter holding the 50 SMA, or actually it closed right below it on this past Friday, but overall looks like it could potentially be forming a double bottom here. We'll see what happens. This is a little bit kind of wedging action, so keep that in mind. Upwork forming a base here, and I do want to show the anchored VWAP here because this is definitely something that I'm going to study. But overall, if you set the anchored VWAP right at the huge earnings gap up, which is the highest volume in the past year, you can see it finds support there, here, here, and here. So definitely something I'll look into further to see if I can kind of build out an edge using this indicator. And lastly, we've got ZS, which is also kind of building out its base here. So overall, there's a few things here that I'm watching when it comes to the former leaders, when I'm kind of deciding whether I want to keep an eye on them because I believe they could potentially lead once more. First, let's go to pins here. You can see it's forming a higher low here while some of them are forming lower lows. This is a sign of RS. It's also retaking the key moving averages. So all of them that are above the 50 SMA at this point are kind of more likely candidates to lead once more. Also, when looking at MarketSmith, if we go back to that, if we enter pins, this one still has promising estimates for 2021 and 2022, very strong with the most recent revisions up. So if something looks like that, versus if we go to Peloton, these revisions are down and not the greatest estimates for 2021, although the estimates for 2022 are still very, very strong. So a little bit of a knock against it that the revisions are down, but really what's most important to me is the price action. Is it holding up strongly like Tesla? Even though it decreased quite a bit, about 40%, it's forming a higher low here, while a lot of these are forming lower lows. So that's a little bit stronger Tesla versus Twilio in my mind. So keep that in mind. Keep these kind of on another watch list. Keep an eye on them, set alerts, and we'll see what happens. Probably at least a couple of these will do very, very well in 2021. So that's kind of it for potential new leadership and past leadership. And now let's move on to the indexes and start with the QQQ on a daily time frame. So taking a look at the QQQ, you can see that overall on this Monday, we had a slight gap down, a move all the way down here to around 312, then a promising close, which is bullish. And on this day, we had another gap down, but once again, a pretty strong closing range right near the top of the trading day. So even though these were kind of down days, they were kind of promising given the action off the lows. Then on this Wednesday, obviously we had the fall through day on the Nasdaq, and the QQQ likewise had a very strong day, a 3-bar break above this pivot, and a pretty strong close, although it was rejected at the 50 SMA on this day right here. Then on Thursday, we had another gap up and then a very strong close right above this pivot. Although on the Nasdaq Composite, you can see we're still below that key metric, but we are above that key 50 SMA. So overall, taking it day by day, very strong action all 4 days on the QQQ and the Nasdaq. And on the weekly, if we go to this chart right here, you can see that we had a very strong week. Overall, we were up 2.71% with a daily closing range on Friday of 93% and a weekly closing range of 99%. So the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a stage 2 uptrend because we're above a rising 30-week moving average. Moving on to the SPY, and let me lower this a little bit and move this over here. Overall, on the week, we were up 1.17% with a daily closing range of 98%, a weekly closing range of 99%. The expectation is sideways or higher, and we are above a rising 30-week, so we are in a strong stage 2 uptrend. And on the SPY, we're also above a rising 10-week, which makes it a little bit stronger. And I forgot to point that out on the QQQ. We also retook that very key level, as well as the high of this week right here, 324.2, and we just closed above that on this Friday, or actually this Thursday last week. Moving on to the IWM, you can see that we retook the 10-week here, although it was an inside week here. Overall, we were up 1.42% with a daily closing range of 91% and a weekly closing range of 99%, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend. The expectation is sideways or higher, as it is for the SPY and QQQ. Moving on to Ethereum, you can see this is setting up nicely. Nice kind of base within base, and overall a strong move above these pivots here. And it was up 20.9% on the week with a daily closing range on Friday, or actually Thursday, of 95% and a weekly closing range of 98%. The expectation is sideways or higher, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend. And looking at GBTC, this is very similar. Overall, it's acting very well. A nice consolidation week within this wick, and it's above a rising 10-week and 30-week, so it is in a stage 2 uptrend. And the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher. Overall, it was up 9.55% on the week with a daily closing range on Thursday of 99% and a weekly closing range of 82% for a very strong week. And moving on to the FFTY, you can see once again a very strong week, closing right near the top of the trading range, up 1.92% with a daily closing range on Thursday of 91%, weekly closing range of 98%, but we are still below a declining 10-week, and you can see we are above a rising 30-week, so we are in a stage 2 uptrend. The expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, but I would like to see us retake that key level. And lastly, or actually not lastly, we've got SMH, which continues to be very, very strong, taking out these pivots right here, as well as the 10-week. And the expectation from this bar is really sideways or higher. Overall, it was up 4.68% this past week with a daily closing range of 100% and a weekly closing range of 100%. And overall, we are in a strong stage 2 uptrend. And lastly, we've got the VIX, which continues to take out these lows. So keep that in mind. But overall, from the indexes, the expectation really is sideways or higher with very strong closes to the week. So moving on, let's talk about my previous watch list from this past week. And let's sort by that weekly change. So overall, our best performer this week was InMode, which had a strong move off the 50 SMA. This day really would have been the day to get in here. A strong move through this high and this high as well off the 50 SMA. You could put risk here about 2.5%, which is a pretty good risk reward. And overall, we'll see how it acts versus these prior highs. AMAT we've already covered, looks very strong, continues to break out along with the rest of the SMH stocks. SI, nice move off the 50 SMA, 3-bar break, and 2-2 reversal on this Tuesday. Looks strong. Not the strongest end to the week on this Thursday, but did find support at the previous day's close and near the 21 EMA as it forms out this space here. I would love to see kind of one last contraction. You can see that this is pretty deep, about 50%. This is about 36%. So kind of as tight as it can get, that would be very, very promising using this as a potential pivot if it does have a little bit of a kind of drift down back to the 50 SMA. LRCX along with AMAT, very strong this past week. A nice breakout on this Thursday, up 7.4%. Strong end to the week with a daily closing range of 98%, weekly closing range of 99%. And overall, I like how it exploded up on this Wednesday with a kind of kicker candle from these 2 inside days. ABNB, you can see, formed a higher low here and moved up towards the 50-day SMA, but still having a little bit of trouble with that key moving average. So maybe it needs kind of one more contraction here before pushing through here and potentially challenging all-time highs. SLQT, nice strong move off the 50 SMA, and overall kind of challenging this prior pivot. It is definitely kind of wide and loose, so I would love to see it kind of drift downward and then kind of use this as a pivot. Sono, nice move off the 50 SMA area, retaking the 21 EMA and 10 SMA. GM consolidating right near this prior pivot, so potentially actionable next week. I like the move on this Wednesday and then kind of 2 consolidation and quiet days on below average volume. Box, nice move, especially on this Thursday, breaking above these highs. HOLX, you can see a move off the 200 SMA area. Lift, you can see nice move off the 21 EMA. Nice upside reversal action also on this Wednesday. DKNG retaking that 50 SMA. I don't really like the look of this too much anymore. It's definitely a little bit wider and loose, and I think there's better charts out there. But I will continue to kind of monitor this because it is definitely in kind of its own special group along with Penn and potentially a leader in that group. Wayfair, you can see, kind of failed to break out here once again on Monday, but found support at the 21 EMA and had a pretty strong end to the week on this Thursday. And next up, we've got Roblox, which pulled back this past week, but had a little bit of a move up on this Thursday, but definitely needs a little bit more time to kind of firm up, tighten up before it kind of builds out this IPO base here, and ideally does a little bit of a U-turn here and challenges this pivot. And lastly, we've got ZI, which does not look good. You can see kind of broke expectations, closing below the 50 SMA. I wanted it to kind of tighten up above that key moving average, but instead it kind of broke through that key level, had some pretty poor closes and 3-bar breaks on this day, as well as Thursday, not really participating in the overall tech rally. So overall, that's kind of my watch list and how it performed. We had a bunch of them over 10% in mode, AMAT and SI. LRCX very close, ABNB strong as well. And make sure you guys tune in tomorrow for my next list of ideas. So moving on to sentiment, let's first take a look at my Twitter surveys. And overall, you can see an increase in bullishness from 50.4% to all the way to 68.3% bullish, which is kind of an extreme value. But given that we're so close to a fall through day, I think that's expected, especially considering the very strong end to the week that we had. And looking at the bulls versus bears poll, you can see that, interesting enough, even though there was very strong action in the week, there's actually becoming less bullish, which is a promising sign. And you can see the put call ratio is back near very, very bullish. That's unfortunate, but not unexpected. And lastly, we've got the name exposure index, which is actually going down, which is once again promising if this is a contrarian indicator. So overall sentiment is a little bit overheated when it comes to my sentiment surveys, as well as the put call ratio. But the other two show that there's still a little bit of hesitation and kind of worry in the market, which is a good thing. We want kind of bull markets and uptrends to climb a wall of worry. So moving on, let's talk about the IBD Big Picture article. Overall, their headline is stock market tone improves as Nasdaq surges, S&P 500 hits new high, but these risks remain. And overall, they discussed a lot of the things that we already talked about. We talked about the fall through day on the Nasdaq, the strong action from the S&P 500 as well. However, they do discuss how the Nasdaq still has to make a decisive move above this 13,600 level. So we'll see if that happens. And overall, they talk about the semiconductors, TSMMU, which had very strong earnings reported. LRCX, KLAC broke out of cut bases. So there's a whole bunch of potential leaders in that space that we should be watching and keeping on our lists. And overall, their current outlook is a confirmed uptrend, 4 distribution days on the Nasdaq, 3 on the S&P 500. And moving on to the GMI signal, this is still red since March 24th, but this hasn't been updated since this past Wednesday. So we'll see if this kind of turns green this weekend, given the strong action on Thursday. And the QQQ short-term downtrend should have ended on this past Thursday. And overall, the last GMI score on Wednesday was 3 out of 6. So overall, taking everything into account, my current view is a confirmed uptrend, and I'll be looking to position in emerging leaders such as the semiconductor stocks and increasing my overall exposure. Thanks so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please go ahead and leave a like down below. It really helps my channel. And of course, subscribe if you are new and looking forward to more videos just like this one every single week. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys in future videos.